Hello, I'm Jay Meyer, and I live east of Stevensville. And the beauty behind me of our green field and all of the foliage that you see is something that didn't just happen. It's part of what agriculture has done to the land, and mainly it's because of irrigation. So our topic today is irrigation and how important water is and water usage and how we manage the water for all purposes. The reason I have a shovel and I have an irrigation dam here, I was going to show you a few methods today of how to spread water over the land, and which is just different forms of irrigation. You probably recognize that farmers always carry a shovel or have a shovel. What you think of when you think of a farmer or a rancher. Ranchers are generally thought of as raising livestock, mainly cattle, and farmers are thought of as raising crops, working with the soil and growing crops. This particular ranch is a cattle and hay operation, and the main job for the person in that setting is to raise grass, because the cattle turn grass into a usable protein that we call beef or meat, and we raise hay to sustain the cattle in the winter time when the grass isn't growing naturally, but they're still eating grass. And probably you and your family are pretty aware of grass-fed animals and food source that they are, and that's what a cattle rancher is catering to, is providing that commodity to the public. Right now I'm going to set this dam. It's called setting a irrigation dam in a ditch, and the ditch would normally have water in it because of the time of year we're doing this class. The irrigation season has come to an end, but I will show you the method of setting the dam to allow water to run out onto the field behind me, and then you will be given pictures of the water running onto the field as well. Hopefully you can imagine that water is in this irrigation ditch, and of course water runs downhill, and as you look in the direction of the camera, the water will run toward the mountains. Our ranch dog Winston is looking for moles or voles right now, and he's in a dry ditch. But ordinarily you would have water flowing in the ditch, and you'd take your irrigation dam, which is what I have here, and you would spread it across the ditch and use it as a trap to take the water, and you would have it fill up over the black tarp. The farmer would probably stand here and put weights on the dam as the water begins to. This little cut right here, the water would start coming the way my shovel is, and it would start running out into this field. And that's would be an irrigation, flood irrigation, that would allow the water just to spread out over the land And it would take, in this instance, it would take probably 12 hours to cover this particular set before we'd move the dam on down the ditch to do another section of the field. Okay, so we just came from the creek, which we call the diversion point, where the water leaves the creek and heads toward off the creek into a head gate. This being the head gate for a ditch that will take us to take the water over to that sprinkler pump. And so you would take the water, take these boards out of the head gate, and let the water go down a ditch. In the ditch behind me. We've talked about the diversion point where the water comes from the creek into a ditch, into a head gate. The head gate diverts it into a ditch measuring device, commonly known as a weir, W-E-I-R. And this weir allows the water commissioner to measure the amount of water that the farmer is taking. As we all know, there are so many interests in the use of water that we need to share its use with as many people as we possibly can. And your water right is built to do that by only giving the amount of water that is necessary to water your crops. This is our sprinkler pond, and the water that we turned into the ditch that runs through the measuring device we call a weir winds up in this pond. And what you're looking at is the irrigation pump motor that goes into the water and pumps the water up into that blue pipe. The blue pipe takes it again underground over to the pivot point where the blue box is. And the reason it has to go underground and the electricity has to go underground is that the pivot, which is on wheels, is called a pivot because it goes around in a circle. So it travels 360 degrees to get back to where it is right now. We call this the pivot point, and this is where we can turn the pivot on. It's a large computer within this blue box, and we can open the box up and there'll be a computer here. Okay, this is the control panel for the pivot, and you can see here it has a lot of information on the screen, but it allows you to do so much more. It tells you the time of day it is, it tells you the date that we are looking at the screen, it tells you how many volts of electricity is available, It tells you where the pivot is itself. We don't have the pump on at this point in time, but it's ready to turn on if we hit the switch. It tells you that the water is on. It tells you that it is delivering 1.99 inches of water to the ground. The nice thing about this machine is you can put on the amount of water that you want to put on. So if you push the button depth and you don't want 2 inches of water, you only want 1 inch of water, you do depth, it's one inch, you put in enter, and it changes the amount of time that the pivot would take to make one complete revolution, putting on 1 inch of water, an inch of rain to your crop. So 1 inch of water takes, rounding it to 70 hours to make a complete circle. If you put depth and you want 2 inches of water on there, you push enter, it changes it to 138 hours, 138.7 hours to make a complete revolution. So for a higher level thinking question that will be given to you is, what do you need to do with the pivot to put more water on your land? And the answer is, you control the speed of your pivot. You've seen some different methods of irrigating. They all do the same to the plants. They deliver water to the plant, and as we talk about efficiency for the water, it's important to realize that the plant only needs so much water. And so flood irrigation, you tend to overwater. These sprinklers, either hand line or wheel line, you can control by the amount of time that those sprinklers are on the ground. So that's a little more efficiency than flood irrigating. The pivot, because it's automated, it takes human error out of the equation. So if you want to deliver an inch of water to your crop, the pivot will do that for you. Water has to go through that little hole. So the water comes down and it has to go through this nozzle. And this nozzle at the beginning, closest to the pivot point, is small. And as you go down the line of the pivot, the nozzles gradually get larger, which delivers more water. And then they hit this little spinner here, and it makes it look like what your lawn sprinklers do. But this particular section goes so much slower than the end that you want less water coming out to equal the amount of water that's coming out the lower end to the plants. This is the motor that drives the wheels, and this is the motor that the panel that we were at, when we asked the pivot to put on 2 inches of rain so that it's moving 9% of a minute. What the computer tells this motor to do, and it drives the pivot forward. But the important thing to think about is the length of the pivot. The end tower needs to move faster than this tower. This is the first tower. More and more greenhouses and specialty crops are delivering only the amount of water that the plant needs through a tiny hose in a drip irrigation system. So as we advance in technology, we advance in the efficiency of the use of water as well. And that is our lesson for today. And thank you.